Welcome, and thank you so much for purchasing the children's audiobook bundle, Whitney Learns a Lesson, Books 1, 2, and 3, written by Susan G. Charles and narrated by Marlene Markos. We certainly hope you enjoy your 3 adventures with Whitney Wallace and all her friends and family. And if you're looking for even more books by Susan G. Charles, please feel free to check out some of her other works for kids and adults on Amazon, Audible, Barnes & Noble, Apple, etc.
Welcome, and thank you for purchasing the audiobook of Whitney Wallace's Unbelievable Family History, Book 1, in the Whitney Learns a Lesson series, written by Susan G. Charles and narrated by Marlene Markos. Thank you for purchasing this audiobook. We hope you enjoy it. Chapter 1. Whitney Wallace had a very big problem. She had a very big imagination. She loved to dream of wild adventures, but everyone around her was very boring. Sometimes she would imagine that her very boring father was a superhero. Sometimes she would imagine that her mother was a secret spy. But really, her father wore a suit, without a cape underneath, and carried a briefcase without any hidden superweapon inside. Her mother made chocolate chip cookies that weren't secretly poison, and made lots of phone calls that weren't to her secret spy bosses. So even though Whitney was sure that her life was meant to be very exciting, it was really just very boring. Whitney would sit and stare at her boring room. She would walk down the boring stairs. She would eat her boring breakfast. Then she would sit in her boring backyard. There was never anything at all to do, and certainly no one interesting to do it with. The only thing that was a little bit exciting in Whitney's life was her big sister. Her big sister Winnie was away at college. Whitney was sure that Winnie's life was very exciting. She would imagine Winnie inventing new and amazing devices. She would imagine Winnie solving world hunger. She would imagine Winnie discovering the meaning of life. So Whitney was just a little bit excited about her big sister Winnie coming home for a visit. The rest of Whitney's family was excited about Winnie coming to visit too. Whitney's aunt and uncle and her grandparents were coming to visit so that they could see Winnie. Whitney could only hope that her big sister would bring one of her fancy new inventions with her. She imagined it would be something like a vaporizer, or maybe even a robot that could make her life far less boring. Chapter 2. Waiting for Winnie to come home was very boring. Finally, the doorbell rang. Whitney ran to the door. She skidded on the rug in the front hallway and slammed into the door. She unlocked the door as fast as she could. "Winnie!" she yelled as she threw the door open. "Hi, Whitney!" Winnie smiled and hugged her little sister. "Oh, how I've missed you," she said. "You're always so exciting to be around." "I missed you too," Whitney said with a big smile. "What did you bring?" "What do you mean?" Winnie asked. "Did you bring an invention? A vaporizer? A robot?" Whitney asked hopefully as she peeked around her sister, thinking she was just clever enough to be hiding it behind her back. "I'm sorry, Whitney, I didn't bring any of those things," Winnie laughed. "Well, what did you bring?" Whitney asked and stomped her foot with frustration. "I brought laundry," Winnie said with a grin, and she held up a big sack of laundry. "I'll take that," Whitney's mother said and took the bag from Winnie. Whitney stared at her sister. She sighed as she realized that her big sister was just as boring as her boring house and her boring parents. "Sorry, Whitney," Winnie said as she ruffled her little sister's hair. "I do have some homework if you'd like that." "No, thanks," Winnie sighed and then walked away. Whitney's grandparents arrived next. Sometimes Whitney would imagine that her grandfather was an amazing magician. He liked to wear a big black top hat, so she thought it might just be true. But when she tried to get him to make a cookie disappear, all he did was eat it and then say, "Ta-da!"
Sample complete. Ready to continue?